Morning coffee with Thoth.
Morning coffee with Thoth. I think that's what we're doing today. Let me see.
I like my coffee.
So is this coffee with Thoth?
I guess it is.
Morning coffee with Thoth?
He takes his glasses off.
Because we do tend to have very philosophical conversations in the morning.
Coffee is a stimulant.
So yesterday when we played, I realized that I was tired. I realized that I hadn't slept well and I should have taken a nap, and I hadn't. So the tiredness hit me really strong when we went out.
We also had 2 negative discussions.
Right. 2?
Yeah. One was about our past housemate, and one was about the world changing and not being, and no longer being receptive to the work.
Right. And they didn't feel negative at the time, I think, that they were just conversations. And then the tiredness hit me at the same time, and then there wasn't anyone in the space.
The gazebo was empty.
Totally empty. And so
It's funny, I came in there and I was still all big buzzed and excited.
You were
about
excited to play.
Even though, and I observed that there was nobody there, but I still was excited to do ceremony and do the call.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Isn't it?
I don't really understand, sweetie.
You don't understand either. Okay. So, I experienced when you were playing, when you were starting the ceremony and doing this whole dedicated, disciplined thing that you do, and I'm sitting there and I'm feeling tired, and I started feeling discouraged by the lack of any outside stimulus coming in, and then I'm looking at you, and I'm watching you, and I'm going, how is he doing this? How is this? Where is this? The stream of motivation and energy coming from? It's not coming from outside of you at all. And where is it coming from? How are you doing this? And so I was feeling tired and discouraged, and then I joined you, and I didn't have any energy. And you would just, like I said, you go, you're just so...
Is that how I do it?
It's just so...
That's funny.
And I watch you doing this, and I'm still...
So that made you feel separate, and you
did.
Called a halt to it.
And then I stopped everything, because I'm just like, I feel like I'm playing by myself. Because you're just in this passionate expression, and I'm just trying to get through it, basically. And then I watched you play solo, and I was kind of falling asleep a bit, and I could hear the surrounding of the birds and the trees and the people talking and music playing and you singing, and it just seemed so small, and just realizing how insignificant it is in the great scheme of the world, and that no one is there, and you're still so just so committed. And I'm just, a decade ago you would have an audience witnessing that, people giving you money, whereas now I've watched over the past decade or longer that all fall away. No money, no audience really, no nothing, and yet you're still doing it in the same intensely committed way. How?
What is it? I don't know.
You don't know?
I mean, I can only say that it feels right.
It feels right.
And I almost it almost feels as if there's such a high level of delusion about it that I'm insane in doing it.
You seem kind of insane,
Yeah.
even to me, your wife.
I know that nobody understands, and I think that the only possibility that somebody could understand is to do that with me and to see that the energy expression and to be there with it, and then they say, "Oh, he's doing this thing." But all of the things that I do, I really, really feel strongly. I put peppermint in my mouth. I put eucalyptus in my nose. I give myself a lovely scent from the. And I got that in Mexico City from. I sang a thing to her.
You still put that in your ceremony?
I put it on my wrists, and so then I put the air around me. I put the air full of that scent. But it feels to me, and my delusion is that to put full passion into a space that has immense sonic significance, which I call a sacred space, causes that sound and that passion to hang there for a long, long time. I don't know how long. And to do that on a regular basis then just, in a sense, erects a sonic edifice that will be experienced by people in the future in a way that they feel bliss, the bliss and the passion of that. And they don't know where it came from. And it reminds me very much of me going into the kitchen and putting the dishes away for everybody, and nobody ever knew why and how that happened. And it is the same, it would be the same here. So what is the purpose for me, and what is from that selfish, what do I get from it? And
what do you get from
what
it?
do I get?
What do you get from it? You must get something because you keep doing it.
I think it's the holographic reality that the self is so fully realized and my being duty is so expressed that I am fully realized at that moment.
Yeah.
More than any other time.
Yep. You change. You're not this. You're not the same. You're not this being right now sitting having coffee. You're this intense version of yourself that I still just, even when I'm playing with you, I'm just kind of like, how is he doing this? What is? I've been watching you for over a decade, and I still look at you like that. And you talk about. You said, like, for someone to do it with me, then they can understand. I've been doing this with you.
Well, they can understand that it really is, if I may be so bold as to say, it is really special.
That's not so bold. It is special, honey.
It is.
It is special. This is special.
It's the kind of thing that has made me so, wherever it comes from, it's made me extremely passionately dedicated to it. And
It gives you a feeling. It does something to you.
yeah. Yeah, I've discovered, in the use of all these sacred tools, I've discovered a full commitment of heart and love in the most profound way. And I can only say that I am, and that's why I do that. And it's so fully express. And in a sense, it's kind of like modeling that to say here is a way,
Mm-hmm.
and it has no coercion. It doesn't coerce anybody. It just gives.
Well, especially now because the cases aren't even open. There's no sign of
And I
expressing.
did feel coercion when we had the cases open. I feel so, in a sense, blessed that I don't have to have cases open anymore. That I can really just explode, as I call it.
Yeah, and that, yeah, because
I also, in that way, believe that by practicing it this way, that I can die well.
absolutely, because it's your own experience, its own personal experience that you're having, a deeply dedicated devotion. But it's still just so mind blowing to me, because for me, I absolutely realized, especially in the last 6 months to a year, of watching the audience disappear and the money disappear and all the.
And I have to.
And it's not. I can't say it doesn't affect you, right?
It does affect me. It makes me sad for the world.
For the world.
It makes me sad for the world because the world is descending into this place. I'm not going there. I actually am going the opposite direction. I'm going towards more ecstasy and more bliss and more separation from all these things. I don't use a cell phone. I don't. When I sit at the table, I'm not summoning my cell phone. I can go into stillness. I did that at this when you were doing it. It was really nice, and all the people trying to sell stuff would shake them in front of my face, and I just stayed in stillness.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's interesting.
And then the guy was selling. He had our package ready, and he was shaking it up the top and trying to get my attention. Then, and it's like I know everything's happening.
Yeah, you're hyper aware when you're in stillness.
I'm actually more aware of. I actually am really aware that it's empty.
Yeah.
Even more aware and energetically, it means that I will not go as far into explosion as.
But you go really far.
Yeah.
You do some incredible shit. And when I watch the footage, and I
You watched it.
when I see little bits of the footage later, I'm always just amazed at these beautiful little tableaus that you make with your dancing, and it's just amazing what you're able.
I actually feel that was that's an inspiration to Kira, and she's holding this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I
It
know.
makes me feel somewhat feel guilty.
Why? Oh, right. This thing we talked about when we were talking to Kira the other day. I think she does look up to you and me as examples of that this kind of way of life and expression, public expression, is possible, and you can be supported, like just magically be supported and have the resources to make sure you have what you need to live to keep doing it. And but we were talking about how that has really shifted in the last decade, because
We talked about that right before we played.
and that was an interesting realization that even in my lifetime of playing with you, I observed when you were doing this in the end of 2008, and I first met you. I was observing, and then when I started playing with you in 2009 at the Angel Tunnel, I experienced very large audiences. I don't know how much money was being made because I was just getting tipped, which is cute. I got tips.
I was tipping the sweetie.
He tipped me for...
You weren't a sweetie yet.
No. I wasn't even the young lady.
No, you weren't young lady yet.
I wasn't Lila'Angelique.
No, you made that choice back when we left.
Pink Angel. Wow.
I mean, that leaping came was. We're talking about that.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
pretty
we'll
fun.
talk about that forever.
Yeah, it was just so huge.
Well, because over time, it's realizing that was one of the
Huger than
most
anything
insane
ever done.
choices
Yeah, insane.
that either one of us could ever make. Probably one of the stupidest, most insane choices. And yet
Well, I don't know, stupid.
not stupid, but it did bring us to where we are today.
Insanity is what we have to own to. Stupid is a different.
No, it's not stupid, but it was very bold, very intense. And you were only 50. You were 54 at the time.
Sacrifice that I
Yeah,
did. in
let go
doing
of
that.
everything. But this thing that
Everything.
someone like Kira looks at us now and sees us as an inspiration that it is possible. But we've been doing it for a decade, and back then, you know, I was watching as everything was falling apart back then, over a decade ago. And there was boom boxes blasting everywhere, no quietness for you to express yourself. And then we watched as the money, you know, got smaller and smaller and smaller. The audiences got smaller and smaller and smaller. And you experienced prior to that, this is what we were talking about while we were going to play yesterday, which just doesn't help anything, how you experienced the slow decay. You had like the optimal time was in the late 90s when you were with the band. And we talk about how I was kind of missing during that time. Where was I?
Too young.
I was a baby.
When it was with Michael and I had the best experience of that because people were very receptive in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Then we were very mobile. We could go wherever we wanted. We were invited to all sorts of things. We did weddings. I mean, you and I have never really done many weddings.
How many weddings have we done? 5, maybe 4.
Not that many. I don't remember.
You used to do a wedding every weekend.
But we basically
An event every weekend.
we would do all sorts of weddings,
Yeah.
and it's interesting.
I do. One of the things we've talked about and thought about over the years is that if we as a unit existed back in the 80s, 25 years ago, when things like Cirque du Soleil and Blue Man Group existed, that we would have just exploded. Because Blue Man Group was a street performance group in Manhattan. Cirque du Soleil was a street performance group of stilt walkers in Quebec. And for example, something like Cirque du Soleil, they were stilt walkers and fire eaters. That's not really, you know, back when they didn't have the funding to do what they ended up creating, they weren't doing something in the street that was as magical and profoundly beautiful, in my personal opinion, as what we have done. And the idea that we have passed between each other over time has been, what if we were around during that time, when it feels like there was like a little opening during that time in history, where there was an opening for a couple of really unique groups to get through, and then it closed. People like Bobby McFerrin as well.
Yeah, Bobby McFerrin came through that too.
Bobby McFerrin, Blue Man Group, Cirque du Soleil.
There are a bunch of people like that.
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't Bjork coming through?
Bjork as well.
Right now, everybody's auto-tuned, and people don't even know what singing is.
Yeah, and the goo-gaw associated with music and performance and music videos and stuff, it's just too much for something as humble as what we do and simple to be
But people
seen.
they can't see it. They need to have it really amplified, very loud, which is why restaurants do that all the time.
Yeah.
Because people's ears are deaf. He'll be going deaf, a lot of people, and that will be eventually one of the big things is getting those ear replacements and ear pieces for everybody. That will be a business that somebody probably already knows that they can go into, because a lot of people will have deafness.
Replace people's ears?
Yeah.
Okay. I won't have to replace yours or mine.
And you're still doing pretty well, and this one has gets kind of triggered by some things. But
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting old, and that's the way it goes. The body deteriorates. You can't. At least I can still hear, or I hear pretty well. I can hear little sounds all over, and you react to them all the time.
All the time.
So that's good.
But it almost does feel like, well, it does feel like to me that we haven't really been lucky in terms of being recognized for what we do, especially you, having done it for longer than I've been alive. But we have been lucky in regards to something having come just completely out of nowhere to help keep us alive, and that we can then just do it for our own enjoyment. Because it really does feel in this day and age that we're kind of out on if we didn't have the security that we have now, the reality of that people don't pay attention and there is nothing really happening anymore would so deeply affect us. We would be so afraid.
Well, would it destroy me?
It would, and you would just
I
fade
would be
away.
destroyed, and I don't experience that there's any being who would have been of any help.
No.
And looking around, and that's kind of what I'm reacting to yesterday, is to know that so fully that there are no beings that would have
helped
come
you.
forward.
No, and the delusion that we had for a very long time that someone
that
would,
there were. Yeah.
that there were people that would save us, help us, recognize what we were doing was very beautiful and sacred, in my own opinion.
But I think the only sacredness is effectivo. That cash, that's the only thing that people care about. And I see that all around too, that is the only thing that people care about.
Yeah, that
now.
people worship it. They bow down
God
to
now.
people who have a bunch of money, or say that I made a bunch of money doing this and this.
And it doesn't even really matter where the money came from.
No.
It can be from the most putrid
Inane,
source. And it's
stupid
still that
thing.
being is then respected so much just because they have that.
Because they have that money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
People see that and then they copy it
they
act
want
like
to
that.
figure out how they can have that. They don't care about a noble cause. You know, it can be a very questionable or very relatively inane something, but if it's made the individual a lot of money, then people are like, oh wow, you know. Whereas if it's a noble cause like we've done, that is not associated with, we've always known that we're not going to make a lot of money doing this. We've always known that. It was never going to be something we were going to make millions doing, ever. That's not why we did it. So in a way it almost feels like we're in this space now of safety, because something just miraculous happened in our lives when my mother passed away. It just came out of nowhere. It has nothing to do, that was something else I was thinking about, is my mother passing away and leaving me this gift had absolutely nothing to do with her saying to me, I love you, I love what you do with Thoth, I think it's beautiful and noble, and here is this gift, because I love what you do, and I want to help you to sustain yourself so you can continue to do it and keep sharing it. No, it's because I just happen to be her daughter. My sister got the same amount. She doesn't do anything with it, you know. So it's just, that's been another delusion that I've had, of that it's some mystical meaning behind us being sustained by this money. It's not. It just happens to be that that happened, and that I love you, and that we're doing this thing, and we've been doing it long enough where we can just keep going, and we don't need people to pay attention. But at the same time, we're kind of standing on this precipice and looking at the reality of what the world is, and it affects us anyway. We go like, holy shit, if we were in that position of needing to be sustained by the outside world, needing people to pay attention to what we were doing, we would be so fucked right now. We would be so fucked right now. And we're able to be like that much more grateful for our position, but at the same time it's very disturbing to go out and play and see how fucked we would be without being in this position, and how just so not guaranteed this was to happen at this time, and that it happened at the time when everything started falling apart. Like it literally started happening right when the audience started to drift away, the money started to diminish, and then suddenly we're okay, and we can just go off and live our lives and keep doing this just because we want to.
Yeah.
It's a miracle, but it's also just kind of out of nowhere. And that reality can affect me sometimes more than other times. It affects me, the fact that people just don't care, and that would really make a big difference in our lives if we weren't safe. How does that make you feel?
I do wonder if I'm capable of sustaining this and I imagine myself losing everything and continuing to pray for him in spite of not being in rags. Maybe even sleeping in a corner. What would be happening? Would I be able to do that still? And as more raggedly I get, as more unfed and not eating as I would, or starving, would I then even be more ignored and more mocked because I have so little? And that's what would happen.
Oh, because you stink.
Yeah, and stink and not be bathed. So I'm not going that way, and my soul script surely has not. That is not my lesson yet, or it may never be. I don't have any idea what can happen in the future. Sometimes I wonder, but that is the challenge.
And we have talked about it, and I have teased you occasionally about, without me, you'd be on the street. I've all throughout the time we've been together, almost. That's just been kind of a running theme between us.
It is without you, I would be on the street, and I would be, because there is not a single person who is willing and has ever been willing to step up for the devotion and expression that I do, because there's nothing in it for them. They don't see anything in it for them, so they're not going to do that. And that includes every intimate person that I have ever known. I will say that outright.
Yeah.
They can, I have liked you, but those are just words. Doing is a different thing. Standing, basically, it's like sitting at home and watching Martin Luther King march down Mississippi is different than being there with him and being pelted with fruit, which I experienced when I was young, being pelted by fruit, by racist and the ugly expressions that people had. It's very different. People can sit there and say, I really was for you then, and it's like, well, yeah, all right,
you're not
whatever.
there.
Yeah, it's a very different thing to be in the midst of it.
Very, and that's something else that what?
That's what you have said.
Yeah,
I
and
can't
that's
believe how I'm so there.
Yeah, but that's something else about that we've been realizing in the last 6 months of traveling on our own, is really realizing that nobody else is here. And going back and looking at our lives prior to this and realizing that we have been alone this whole time. There's been kind of a disillusion or an illusion that there were people, that in San Francisco there was hope that people would come to see us. In Manhattan, the Angel Tunnel, there was hope that people might show up, and people might stay and not abandon us. In San Francisco, in San Diego, there was hope that people would come and not just leave us alone. But through the whole gamut of the time that we've been doing this, we've been alone. There's not been anybody who's come and just said, "I love you guys and I'm going to help you." And why would we ever think that would happen? But that sustained me for a long time, is believing that would happen. The fact that we don't need that anymore, and that I can take care of you, is so liberating and so freeing. But at the same time, it's really disturbing that we lost a lot of energy through hoping that something would happen.
We're just hoping that there was a equal or responsive faith in the devotion, but in actuality what occurred was I can't remember the word, but there's doubt.
But why would there be?
Would there be what?
Understanding and support in that way.
It's beautiful.
It is. But there's even doubt sometimes to the beauty of the work, that people will question the beauty, call it noise, call it, and no one comes to our defense. I have to defend ourselves. It's been that way for over a decade, us having to defend ourselves.
It is interesting to be called noise when there's a boombox, when there are boomboxes everywhere and they are screeching auto-tuned voices, and so is that noise? Because people are blasting those all over in here. We'll walk down the street and every restaurant has a boombox with a speaker sitting in front of it playing at such immense volumes.
For a minute we had our neighbor blasting it right next to our heads.
Right next to us.
While we were trying to sleep. And it's interesting. It's really interesting to watch the disillusion of the world around us while having something that keeps us alive. It does feel like destiny, because there's no way we could have kept going without it. No way. And if I think about the alternate timeline of what would we have done if this didn't happen, everything would be so scary. We wouldn't know what to do. But it still hurts me. It still affects me to realize that there's nothing happening anymore, that there is no attention. And I still look at you and I go, how are you doing this? How do you do this? How do you keep going? And you've been doing it so much longer than me. I feel so good to take care of you. I feel so noble, and so it gives me a sense of purpose in my life to take care of you, to provide for you, that I can, is just a miracle to me. That I saw you and I immediately knew what you were doing. I didn't need to ask you questions. Are you singing in a made-up language? Or I just knew what you were doing, and then I pretty much instantly joined you. What a miracle that is. Can I have a coffee kiss?
A coffee kiss.